Thank you everybody for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And we're pretty excited for today's session of AI for social business. And so the topic of AI is one that keeps coming up in our conversations with members. We know it's something that people are grappling with, how to leverage this emerging technology, but also how to make sure it's being done in an ethical and sustainable way. And therefore, we're delighted today to be joined by Rachel and Anna from Careful Industries, a social enterprise helping a range of organizations do exactly that. So you're going to be in their safe hands for the next hour or so. Please do contribute and make it as interactive as possible. And I know that they've designed the session with that in mind. This is a safe space, as you all know, so please do share anything you're thinking about. It's being recorded, so we'll share the session with you afterwards and some follow-up notes and the deck which Rachel and I have put together.
Is everything online fine with SP?
But without any further ado, Rachel, I'll hand over to you to get cracking.
Great. Hello, everyone. So what we're going to do is the next 45 minutes will be a mixture of me presenting and then us doing exercises as a group. So I think I would ask if does everybody have like either a pen and a piece of paper or something they can make notes on, because we do have a couple of collaborative exercises to do. So just to bear that in mind. I have some slides, and I'm going to start presenting now for about a quarter of an hour, no more. So can everybody see those?
Yes, all looks good.
Great. So hello, I'm Rachel. I'm going to talk about how we can make AI better for everyone, not just an extractive thing. So what we find in a lot of the work that we do is that the opportunity that technology offers very often is not distributed among everyone, right? So I've worked on the internet for nearly 30 years now. And when I started back in the 90s, we were all very optimistic. We thought that technology would democratize and open up everything. And while there have been lots of great things that have happened, I think we're probably all aware, ways that maybe the value might flow to a small number of people, and maybe cause worry and anxiety and injustice to others. So I don't know if anyone has heard this phrase, move fast and break things. This is Mark Zuckerberg, who runs Meta, which includes Facebook, WhatsApp, all those companies. And what our work is really about the opposite of that, right? So how can we move deliberatively and carefully and make things better? And so what that looks like is not just thinking about the environmental impact, but also the social, and thinking about those two things together. We're very interested in how technology can have better outcomes for people and planet overall. And so what we're going to do today is a couple of ways of working. I can just see we've got a comment in the chat. Is go through a couple of ways of working in which we can start thinking about maybe some of the things we do offline. Some of our values are brought into the ways we use technology. So AI is two tiny letters that mean hundreds of different things. I don't know how much technology everybody uses in their business, but for instance, AI can be as relatively straightforward as I can see there's someone who's got a transcriptions service running that is powered by AI, but it may be as complex as a amazing bit of technology that is used in healthcare, for instance, which we'll talk about in a moment. But artificial intelligence is a very broad term that refers to any automated set of processes that involve some kind of learning. So what that means is the system can develop capabilities. There are some people who think that AI could lead to super intelligence, which is greater than the intelligence that any person has. But mostly what AI does is it does things like recommend us things on the TV, or auto fill out shopping baskets, or give us advertising. And so a handy way of thinking about it is if we think about it as a set of tools. So it can help us do more things faster. And this really is where it's important to start thinking about our values. And so if we are intensifying, what exactly are we intensifying for? Now, everyone here will have things that happen in their business that could be more efficient, whether that is doing things like calendar booking, logistics, route planning, diary management. There's relatively straightforward things that can take a lot of organizing, and you realize actually, they may as well be automated or handed over to a machine. Another area of sort of extraordinary possibility is looking particularly in diagnostic medicine. So one of the extraordinary things that AI is able to do is go through huge amounts of organized data and look for patterns and trends. And I think probably one of the hero applications of this tech is really looking at how it's used in doing things like reading x-rays, brain scans. It can look at many different people's results and compare and see patterns really, really fast. And so these are like extraordinary capabilities that could completely change how health and the care work. But most of us are not working on that level. And so when we're using AI, whether we're making it or we're purchasing it, I think it's really important to have a think about some of the broader applications and meanings of it. And so, as I alluded to earlier, one of the things that AI does is it makes a small number of people incredibly rich. And I think that can get a little bit lost. And so these 8 particular people, all men, many of whom are headquartered in the Silicon Valley, so they're not representative geographically of many people. Rather than this technology necessarily generating benefit for everyone everywhere, it's making a tiny number of people extremely rich. Another thing that technology does is it actually, I think sometimes counterintuitively, it uses up a lot of natural resource. So I don't know if anybody remembers, maybe about 10 years ago, there was a trend at the bottom of emails to have a message that said, please think of the environment and don't print out this email. And the idea of that is that actually carrying the message on a screen is less environmentally intense than printing out on a piece of paper. But actually, it turns out that storing that little image and pinging it from server to server to server, that uses up loads more electricity and carbon than would ever be used by printing it out, right? So there's all these things that we've learned about how sometimes doing a thing digitally is better for the planet than doing it virtually. But every time we are, for instance, buying a new piece of hardware that will be made with minerals that have been mined very often from, there'll be conflict minerals taken from a country like the DRC, where actually millions and millions of pounds worth of precious metals are extracted every week. Or it may be that the water use and energy use of the data centers is compromising other things. And so if your mission and purpose is about protecting and looking after the planet, it's really important to think really carefully about how we digitize and the role of that. It's also really important to think about what it means to have more data about people and things. So these are 4 very local examples from the UK of things where, for instance, one of them in the bottom left is an example of a supermarket. So with a supermarket loyalty card, which is something that collects data about every purchase that you make, it's now quite normal in the UK for people to be offered a lower price on things they buy more often. And there's something that happens occasionally in little local supermarkets where if a person did have a loyalty card, the value of their shop would go down by as much as £5 or £10, and other people in the line hand over their card, right? And so there's an actual financial cost to people of not having that data collected about them, which is then used to do all kinds of other things. We're in a world where dependence on data means extraordinary things are happening, like kids' behavior at school is becoming very datafied. So whether, for instance, that means paying for your lunch with a biometric scan, having listening facilities in public bathrooms in schools to understand whether or not kids are really going to the loo or doing something else. And I know that this has been rolled out in a number of countries, but in the UK at the moment, we have an increased incidence of the police using facial recognition to monitor whether the people walking past vans are on a watch list. Now, facial recognition in particular is a very controversial technology. It works best on the faces of white men. It is less good at picking up dark skin, understanding age, and very poor at recognizing women and younger people. And yet it's being used in the context of justice. Which leads me to another issue that we have with AI. And this is like a whole other talk that we don't have time for now. But one of the things that happens is every automated decision draws on the data that already exists. And so if there is bias that is already in that data, it will get intensified and become deeper, harsher, worse. So, for instance, on the left here, we have an instance of a delivery driver who's he had an app that he had to use for work to scan in and out with his face to say when his shift had started and ended. And in this instance, the app was not able to recognize his face, and he was wrongly not paid for his work. And so, although, as I said earlier, there are all kinds of amazing things that this technology can lead to, when we're using it, I think it's important to remember that we are adding sometimes to negative intensities that are happening elsewhere. And I think as everyone who has a mission-led, values-led business, it's really important to think about what you are building on, what you're adding to, and what you would rather not. So one of the things that we think about is like, what would happen if we use AI as a scarce and precious resource? So rather than maybe using it for everything, what if we could only use it very occasionally, very specially? What would that mean? What would that look like? And that's a thought experiment we might come back to later on, depending how much we cover overall. Hang on, just having a bit of a slide issue. Right, and so another way of looking at that, and this is we talk about this idea of just enough internet. And what we mean by that is collecting just enough data to do the things we really need to do, to digitize just enough of the process to make it more efficient, but not make it worse for people. And so how can we maximize the benefits, minimize the harm, and really put respecting planetary boundaries at the heart of everything? I think this is really important when we start to think about our values. And so if you just have in your head now, as we go into the next bit, thinking about how benefits and harm show up in your work and the kinds of trade-offs that you're likely to make. And so, I don't know, is everyone familiar with the idea of the FOMO? I can't see everyone. I'm going to ask for a show of hands. It means fear of missing out, right? So a fear of missing out is, I've been talking to lots of people lately who say things like they're bored, or their investors are really leaning on them to use AI to do things that maybe they're not comfortable with because they seem to be novel and interesting and innovative. And this is one of my favorite quotes. Maybe we could all just spend a moment reading it together. But the thing that this says is the very essence of the strategy is explicit, purposeful choice. What that means is, for instance, when you're thinking about what your business strategy is likely to be, rather than say this will benefit everyone, or we will be inclusive, or we will be open, these are all things that no one would say the opposite of, right? Be really clear when you are asserting a strategy that what you're saying is, you're not just voicing a nice to have, you're talking about something that is an essential choice. And if anyone's got questions about that, we can come to that in a moment. So before we head to unpicking values slightly more, I'm going to offer 3 ways that we think about AI and how they connect to our values, which I hope might be helpful. So the first is people first always. So always put people rather than profit or efficiency at the lead, right? So the next is to automate the easy things. And what I mean by automating the easy things is picking the things that everybody knows and understands inside and out, right? So automate the things that are the core capabilities, not the wicked problems that are harder to understand. And the last of these is to embrace lived experience. And so we think in our work, it's really important not just to take the expert review, but to do research and find out what has really happened to people, what the likely outcomes are. So we've got the 5 ways of working. I'll briefly introduce these and then pause and we can talk about values. So there are 5 things that we do when we're thinking about how to bring AI meaningfully into an organization is think about how it sits with their values, how it will help deliver and make a change to the vision, where it might intensify complexity in ways that aren't helpful, where it might ease work the flows, and the last one, which is something we'll be coming to at the very end, is helping people to anticipate consequences. And what I'm going to do, it's always really hard on Zoom. You can only really have the slides or not the slides. So I'm just going to momentarily share this, and then maybe we can break for a moment and reflect. So what we're going to do shortly is think about our organizational values and do a little bit of a thought exercise around those. And this is really a starter for 10, but I'll pause here and turn off the slides, and maybe we can have a couple of minutes to reflect. How is that? Does anyone have any initial thoughts or observations to share before we move on?
Can go maybe. I just love the fact, I think, Rachel, I missed maybe the first 2-3 minutes, but I love that your business is called Careful Industries. So yeah, I love the kind of being careful and kind of cautious approach. And it's actually not often that we hear this. So it's quite a breath of fresh air. It resonates. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else? I heard what was maybe the beginning of a comment. Maybe not. And I just wanted to pick up on Sophie's comment here about nectar. Yeah. And so basically, whenever you get something in which there will be a specific recommendation to you based on your behavior, that will be machine learning that has generated that. And so are we ready to move on to think about values? Or does anyone...
Rachel, I had a sort of comment. I don't know whether it will fit into this particular discussion. So, see, the way I look at it, because I have kind of spent more than a couple of decades on building social businesses, inclusive businesses. So when I heard this topic of AI, okay, my company, I work with Luxottica, world's largest spectacle manufacturing and distribution company. Now, of course, our company is doing a lot of stuff on AI. So you mentioned Mark Zuckerberg. So we have an ongoing project with Meta where we have launched Ray-Ban Meta. So it's basically something wearing wearable glasses where you can record videos, listen to music and stuff like that. And of course, machine learning is an integral part of it. We have lenses, spectacle lenses, the designing part. The AI plays a huge impact or huge role in designing of the lenses. So we have progressive lenses which are at the cutting edge of, which uses cutting edge technology. Of course, AI is a big part of it. Although honestly, I don't understand what AI actually plays a role. But of course, I'm not from the R&D side. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is if I go and talk to my management, that guys, we have 2.5 billion people in the world who do not have access to good vision. We have been doing whatever best we could do in the last 15 years or so, but still there is huge amount of work that is there. How can we use AI? I don't know how. Frankly, I have absolute zero clue, but how can we use AI, machine learning, blah, 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 in order to make these 2.5 billion people get access to good vision? My company is already busy with so many things. So obviously there is always a resource crunch and prioritization. And of course, the R&D will have to prioritize the commercial operation because that's where our bread, butter and jam is coming, not from the inclusive businesses that I am working on, which is, of course, adding value to the company in the long run. So sorry for a
no, that makes loads of sense.
Longish kind of a statement. But what I would be very keen to know, is there a way we can marry these two things, like inclusive business, social businesses, with the concept of AI? I have no clue whether it is possible or whether it is
question, because I think this is a really good example of, and maybe we can just spend 1 minute talking through what that might look like in a positive way and a negative way. And I think that would be a good example for people to bear in mind in the next bit. So, for instance, right, if you, one of the things that AI might be able to do at some point is, for instance, you might be able to create an app in which people can do their own tests, say, and they generate a prescription off the back of that. Now, it might turn out over time that there may be factors related to the physiology of people's eyes or their faces, that means some people get better outcomes than other people, and that because you've put it at arm's length and people are self-serving, what you're not able to do is have the level of oversight and diligence that means that the checks are in place. So this is a really good example of something where in your business you would need to decide, is the risk of somebody possibly having the wrong prescription too high in order to take that away? And if that is the case, you would then need to think about what safeguards need to be in place or how you test it over time, right? And so what we're going to do now actually connects to this really well. So I'm going to ask for, bearing in mind that some people have got their cameras on, I'm off, I'm going to ask for people to put their hands up if this applies to you. Does virtually in Zoom rather than, real hand, does everybody have a set of values for their business that they have, know or have to hand? If you do have a set of values, can you put your hand up using the hand up signal on Zoom? You've got about, I'm going to say about a quarter. So maybe slightly more, about a quarter to half. What I'm going to say, as it's not everyone, we're going to do a slightly different exercise then, because there could have been two ways we could have taken this. But let's take Anna has just put into the chat a list of 4 questions, right? And these questions here may seem like they've got nothing to do with AI. They may feel completely distant, but what we're going to do is put those together and then think about what the outcomes that would have if you were doing, as we were just talking about, bringing in a technology. So can everybody see we've got 4 questions here, and I'm going to give you maybe 3 minutes to make a note of who your business values most, what you value most, the value that you create, and the behaviors that you value. And if you have any questions about that, put them in the chat or just come off mute. That makes sense? Great. Okay, I'm going to give everyone, it is 33 minutes past, and if we come back at 36 minutes, so that's in 3 minutes time. I'm going to presume that everyone is on the same hourly clock.
So Rachel, do we key in our answers on the chat, or we just...
If you just make a note of your answers privately for now, and then we can come back and share those in a minute. How are we? Everybody happy to move on? You can do me a thumbs up. Great. All the people I can see, everyone's happy. Yeah, great, great. Okay. Now, would anybody like to come off mute and share their answer to the first of those questions about who you value most?
So maybe I'll go first on this. Who do you value most? So for the work that me and my team does, we value our beneficiaries or the end consumers. Now, I'm using the word both beneficiaries, which is more, it's not very commercial, so to speak, and also the consumers, because it's a mix of both. And what do you value most? So,
just that one for now.
Okay.
Can I bring somebody else in? I think I saw a hand coming up. Michelle.
Hi.
Hi.
I say what I value most is children and safeguarding children.
Right. Great. Anybody else want to share anything? I can see. Oh, Alex.
Yeah, I've gone a little bit wider on it, but I've put our community,
Yeah.
which is probably a slightly nicer way of saying stakeholders, in a less fancy way, but the community that we operate in.
Great. So we've got somebody else. Shweta, I don't know if I've said that correctly.
Shweta, hi.
Shweta, sorry.
Hi. So yeah, I just wanted to quickly say that the motto for my organization is, we always write these 3 words: every citizen matters.
Great.
And I think that's who we value.
Great. Now, has anyone here, I'm going to assume the answer is probably yes, but I just want to check, encountered user-centered design? Yeah? Madhu, would you like to come in, or are you just putting up your hand? Yeah. So what's most important here is, I think, if we're thinking about designing or automating something, what you're saying is that the people this thing would need to value and not harm. So the people who it would need to deliver a specific benefit to might be children, citizens, community members, or customers. And so one of the things I think is interesting to think about here is, if we're rolling out a new service that might be a little bit risky, to take us back to that example of if we were making, if people were self-testing their own eyes, for instance, would you be willing to expose those people to a degree of risk? And the answer to this, I think, will be different for everyone, right? So if you're doing a child safeguarding business, right, then I'm going to assume you have a zero tolerance on risk to children. However, for instance, if you've got potentially the opportunity of delivering better eyesight to 1 billion people, is it okay if the 500 of those it doesn't work for? Do you see what I mean? Does that, like, when you're thinking about how to innovate, does anybody in their day-to-day work already have those sorts of risk tolerances where they're able to say, well, that's okay if it doesn't really work? Looks like Ben was nodding. Would you like to share about that?
Yes, well, we work in communications, and there's lots of kind of rules of what should and shouldn't work, particularly with digital communications. But actually, someone was always the first person to try something. So you have to try new things, and that's one of the really fun things about working in communication, is you get to be creative and try new things. And so, for example, we just posted a video yesterday with a client that's 7 minutes long. The supposed rule of social media is it should be 60 seconds, but that's just totally made up. It's not true at all, and it is really dependent on the type of content and the audience you're actually trying to reach. So yes, but with some audiences, some contexts, that wouldn't work. But you try things, and so every day we're creating things and trying new things. Yeah, we're trying to anyway. Sometimes you have to convince clients to take that risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my organization works on enabling welfare or social security for citizens, right? So the problem we're trying to solve is that a lot of people don't have access, right? Despite India having a lot of welfare programs, right? So if I think from one perspective, I feel that, there's already a lot of people marginalized who are not able to get access to this, right? So if I can use technology to help them, that's good, right? And if if there's 100 people left out, I can make it better for at least 40, then that's a net positive, right? But then based on what you said, on the other hand, it feels like if you're already living in a very unequal society, should I be making things worse? Am I just assuming that just by, if the only harm I'm doing here is leaving people who were already left out, or is there more harm? I don't have an answer to that, but you made me think through that question that is that all the harm I'm doing? Because that's how I view technology, right? I'm a data and AI person. I use technology every day, but I see it as a net good, because the only harm I see is that somebody's already left out and now they'll be left out yet. But that doesn't mean I should not help the people I can. But I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
Let's bring in Michelle, and then we can have a talk about some of the things that have been raised.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of related to that, in that I think one of the real tricky parts for me is the unintended consequences, that you might have thought about all of this in this way, but then the data you're collecting is used in a way that you didn't anticipate, or people are doing certain things that are, not what you anticipated, especially with AI, where things advance very, very quickly, right? Or patterns are discovered that you, by your nature, aren't able to have access to. And then the other part, I guess, that's tricky is the education. Like when Sophie mentioned about the Nectar point, the Nectar AI, a lot of people actually don't know how AI is used. So there's this whole education element of like, do you understand how your data is being used? And I think so sometimes people can't consent meaningfully because they don't actually understand how it's being used.
Yeah. And so I think what's come out here, and I'm really pleased this has come out, is that in AI in particular, this is a field in which people write lots of principles and lists of what to do and what not to do, right? And I think what's so important to realize and understand is, although we do have a small number of things that we agree collectively are social rules, some of those are human rights, some of those are expressed in the law, that then there's a whole other grey area where what works and aligns with the values of one business may not be appropriate for another, right? And I think when we're thinking about bringing in a new technology that might seem a bit complicated and overwhelming, feels very natural to look for rules to follow, but that actually, if you're able to express your values as behaviors and say, it looks like this when we're living our values, then that can help you work out your absolute red lines. And it means, those are things like, if you're thinking about, is the harm of leaving out people, is that better or worse than not doing it at all, right? Then I would, that is only a decision that I think you're able to make in your business. But by and large, not doing it at all means that no one gets anything. And then what is the ambition to grow? So I suppose if we bring this bit to a close, the message, I suppose, is not that simple here. The message is it's complicated. But actually, I think the advantage that everyone here has is, as someone working in a business where you're really clear on your values and what you're trying to do, you're going to have a sort of moral compass that means that your instincts about your values and your customers, your beneficiaries, going to help you really do the right thing. And there's a very flippant thing I sometimes talk about with some of our clients that actually I think is quite helpful, which is like, don't do it if it feels weird. If you're taking yourself out of your comfort zone in a way that is not fun, right? Don't do it, because it means at the back of your head, your spidey sense is maybe saying, this is a mistake. Now, we've got maybe 10 minutes. I'm wondering if that is enough time to move on to the consequence scanning bit, because not least because Michelle has brought it up. But I don't want to cut anybody off in case there's any other comments. Be happy to move on? Yeah? Right, okay, I'm just going to go back to sharing my slides for a moment. Okay, so I'm just going to move on through the slides. Right, so consequences. We have a methodology called consequence scanning. And one of the things this is meant to help you do is construct risk models, right? So it means that if you think something is likely to happen, you can work out how to respond to it over time. But of course, the hardest thing is working out what is likely to happen, right? Because we're not visionaries who can look ahead into the future. So we can share the slides that have these questions in here, but we've got a number of standard prompts that we use with teams to help people game through what the likely outcomes of something are. So I know these are quite small, so I can read them out. So for instance, like, what might it mean if you've made a digital tool and people don't understand what's happening to their data, right? So they don't trust it, they're nervous of it because they don't understand what's happening, so they're not likely to use it. How is that likely to be an issue later on? What happens if people you're not expecting to use the tool that you've made use it? And like, this is a really interesting one, because normally how we know a product has really worked is when people we don't expect to use it. Sometimes that can be negative, you know, like a classic example of that outside of the field of tech would be how vaping became something that was very attractive to teenagers, when actually it was meant to, you know, make smoking less popular, right? But sometimes those unintended uses is a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. Another example is like, what if it changes how people behave? So if I give you a very specific example here, I don't know if people have heard of the game Pokemon Go, but so this is a game that you have on your phone, and you walk around. It's VR, catching Pokemon in like real life sort of thing. And when that game was originally made, one of the things that was happening is people were walking into the road, right? So they were looking for Pokemon, they weren't looking where they were going, and they were putting themselves at risk. So this is a tiny thing, and I don't know how effective it is, but what that led to is that now in the game, in the interface, there are lots of warnings to stop and look. And if you're crossing a road, there's a little notification that pops up, for instance. And then if you're finding it hard to think of those specific risks, right? You know, we've got a range of different questions that you can ask of your product or service. And so, like, a really good example is this one here, number 3. What might happen if suddenly the thing that you've made is really popular, right? It's much more popular than you thought it was likely to be. Or what would it mean if something that you've created for people to be using in their personal life or at home becomes something that people use at work? You know, so like, for instance, what if you've made a dating app and potential employers are able to look people up on the dating app and see things about their personal life? Is that going to be an issue? And so how this works, how consequence scanning works, is it's an exercise that you would do with your team. It takes about an hour and a half. There are deliberate questions to ask and answer. And at the end of it, when you've come up with all of your possible outcomes, you then sort those into the really urgent ones that need to be acted on now. The ones that you kind of need to alert other stakeholders to, that may not be things you're able to control immediately. And then on the edge, there's the things you need to monitor. What we do here is we divide those into intended outcomes and unintended outcomes. It's not good and bad. Sometimes, we know the intended outcome might come with a risk. Sometimes an unintended outcome could turn out to be a good thing. But we have a whole booklet on how to do this and how to deliver it. Or actually, something we're able to do is come and do it with the team, if that's of use. But so this is a way of thinking about the different sorts of technologies that you're using and making, coming up with really practical sets of values and risks and being able to manage those. And I will turn my screen share off, and maybe we can just open up the last couple of minutes. I can see there's some comments here as well. But great. Anyone have any last thoughts to share with the group? Any reflections?
You might not see it in the chat, Rachel, but Michelle has said this is so helpful. Thank you, from Cambridge.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. It was very, very helpful. And we are currently at Tata's undergoing ethical exercise on AI, a case study.
Great. Tom, can I hand back over to you? Oh, we have a hand up.
Yeah. Hi. Hello. Hi. Can you hear me?
Hi there. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. Thanks for the session, Rachel. I'm Shiroy. I run a digital education company called Naga Ed. We deliver accessible quality material to the hands of tribal and indigenous communities here in India's rural Northeast. And what you discussed, I think a few things came up for me. We're constantly thinking about, one, introducing digital education, leveraging technology to provide quality education. At the same time, there's a lot of risk. We've had a lot of pushback from the parents in terms of, introducing technology, because a lot of risk comes to students, right? So we've been thinking about how do we create, like a policy, even for schools, where they regulate the use of such kind of technology. So we're always in this crossroads of, having these conversations with parents, educating them on, the use of technology, the benefits of technology, as well as the negative consequences. And going forward, a lot of the schools that we work with have problems of not even having teachers, right? So the students are not even getting access at the moment. So how do we leverage AI? So we're looking at introducing AI teachers in terms of leveraging AI to get the content to the students. I think this is going to be a great exercise, especially for our team. Before we start this process, of course, we've started on the tech part, but we've not really sat down and considered these elements. So I'm looking forward to using what you've shared today and do this exercise with my team. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Tom, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Shiroy. So this is a topic which we're going to be doing a lot more on. Please do get in touch if you've got specific queries. as I said at the start, we're going to be sharing some material, the recording of this session, the deck that Rachel spoke through, and I think I'm right in saying that you're very welcome to get in touch with Rachel and Anna if you'd like to talk to them directly. So only thing to say is thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Anna.